All right, so today we're going to be looking at some pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
Definitely heavy family court case. And just a heads up, the documents we're about to unpack are pretty intense.
Yeah, it's always a good reminder that behind all the legal jargon and the filings and the court dates are real people.
Mm-hmm.
And, in family court especially, those human stories are often filled with really difficult stuff, pain, uncertainty.
Oh, absolutely.
And the stakes are so high.
Yeah. And you're talking about kids, right?
Exactly. It's about protecting those who need it most, the children.
Exactly. So let's do it. Let's dive in.
Let's dive in.
We've got a motion for a restraining order.
Okay.
And then the court's decision.
All right.
And of course, we're going beyond just we're going to get into the weeds here and try to figure out the why of this case.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, unpacking not just sort of the legal terms, but also kind of the strategy at play here, and what that might tell us about how these cases unfold.
Okay, so who are the players here?
Right.
We have Whitney Thompson,
Okay.
the mother who filed this motion against Charles Thompson, the father.
Mm-hmm.
3 young children involved. Andrew, he's 6. Vivian is 4. And little Zachary, who's only 2 years old.
Yeah, and it's important to remember, right, that, while we're analyzing these documents, we're talking about a family, and this family's being torn apart.
Oh, yeah.
With each side, fighting for what they believe is best for those kids.
And that's what makes these cases so heartbreaking. And reading through this motion, you can just feel the urgency, the fear coming from the mother.
Yeah.
It's very clear that she believes her children are in imminent danger.
Right, and that's why she's seeking such a drastic measure here. Sole custody and prohibiting the father from any visitation rights.
Wow.
That's a huge request, and I think that really speaks to just how high the stakes are in her mind.
Absolutely. So the motion kind of starts by painting this picture, this pattern of escalating tension.
Okay.
This isn't just some random outburst. This has been building for a while.
Mm-hmm.
They divorced very recently, May of 2023, and there were already custody arrangements in place.
Right.
But then in a matter of days, everything changes.
Okay.
September 1st, a temporary restraining order, a TRO is issued against the mother.
Now that's interesting right off the bat, because TROs in family court are usually, about preventing one parent from interfering with the other parent's, custody or contact with the kids.
Right.
So the fact that there was a TRO against the mother
Right.
raises a lot of questions about what led to that in the first place.
It's like we're starting the story in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. And it sets the stage for a very, contentious situation here.
Yeah, and it only gets more intense because a few days later, September 6th, the mother files this motion and she doesn't hold back.
Okay.
She alleges that her children began disclosing abuse in August of 2023, claiming sexual abuse by their father and some of his acquaintances.
Mm-hmm.
She describes the kids as traumatized, terrified of going back to their father's house.
Yeah, and alleging a history of abuse, especially, sexual abuse, is a powerful tactic, legally speaking, because it immediately shifts that focus to the safety and well-being of the children.
Oh, yeah.
And puts immense pressure on the court to act quickly.
It's like trump card, right?
Yeah.
It's like, look, forget about everything else. My kids are in danger.
Exactly.
And to make matters even worse, she claims that the father has a history of violence, erratic behavior, and even access to assault weapons.
And those details are meant to paint a picture,
Oh, yeah.
right, of a volatile and potentially very dangerous environment for these children. And remember, the court is always trying to determine what is in the best interest of the child.
Right.
And these kinds of allegations, these details are designed to raise serious red flags.
And then comes the detail that really sent chills down my spine.
Okay.
September 4th, just 2 days before she filed this motion, the father allegedly attempted suicide using a personal weapon, and the motion even says that it's unclear if or how he will recover.
Wow.
Talk about upping the stakes.
Yeah, no, that is a game changer, right? A suicide attempt, regardless of the circumstances, introduces a whole new level of complexity to this case.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a desperate cry for help.
Exactly. And for the court, it raises serious concerns about the father's mental state, right? And his ability to provide a stable and safe environment for the children, even for a short visit.
Right.
I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if the court considered ordering a psychological evaluation based on this alone.
So we've got this incredibly tense situation, horrifying allegations, a suicide attempt. The mother is pleading for sole custody.
Yeah.
Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Well, in these situations, nothing is ever truly straightforward.
Right.
I mean, remember, we're only seeing one side of a very complex story here.
Okay.
There's another side that the father's perspective and potentially evidence that we haven't seen yet
Right.
that could, significantly impact how this case unfolds.
You're telling me, because get this, the mother's motion,
Yeah.
it was denied.
Denied. Wow. Yeah, with those allegations and with that suicide attempt. That's pretty unexpected. What did the court order say?
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Judge R.M. Heger's order, issued September 7, 2023, it reads, Respondent's temporary restraining order, granting respondent's sole legal and physical custody of the minor child is terminated. Custody of the minor child is to be returned to him. Respondent's bond to be returned to him.
Hold on. So not only was the mother's motion for a restraining order and sole custody denied, but the existing TRO, which was against her, was also terminated, and custody was returned to the father.
Yes.
That is a significant turn of events.
It's the complete opposite of what you would expect after reading her motion.
Yeah.
We're talking about allegations of sexual abuse, a suicide attempt, and the court essentially said, nope, custody goes back to the father. What could explain that?
Well, you have to remember, we're only seeing a fraction of the information that the court had access to. So there are a few possibilities that could explain this outcome.
Okay, like what?
Well, for starters, the father could have presented a very different version of events.
Yeah.
He might have offered an explanation for the suicide attempt that eased the court's concerns about his mental state. Maybe he provided evidence that refuted the abuse allegations, or perhaps there was a lack of physical evidence to support the mother's claims.
So you're saying that the court might not have found the mother's allegations credible?
It's certainly possible. And remember, in family court, the standard of proof is preponderance of evidence, meaning what is more likely to be true.
Okay.
It's not about proving something beyond a reasonable doubt like in a criminal case.
Right.
So even if the mother genuinely believed that her children were being abused, if the father presented a more convincing counter-narrative, or if there wasn't enough concrete evidence to support her claims, the court might very well have ruled in his favor.
Okay, so it's like we get so caught up in the drama of the mother's motion that we forget there's a whole other side of the story we're not privy to.
That's right. That's why it's so important to analyze these situations from multiple angles. You can't just jump to conclusions based on one set of documents.
So what else could have factored into the court's decision? You mentioned a lack of physical evidence. What about the children's disclosures? Wouldn't their statements hold a lot of weight in a case like this?
They certainly can, but it's not always cut and dry. The court has to consider the age of the children, the consistency of their statements, and whether there's any possibility of coaching or influence from either parent.
Right.
There's always a risk, especially with younger children, that their statements could be misinterpreted or influenced by the adults around them.
So it's not enough for a child to just say, this happened to me?
Unfortunately, no. The court has a responsibility to investigate, to look for corroborating evidence, and to ensure that the child's best interests are protected. And sometimes that means taking a very cautious approach, even if it means delaying a decision that might seem obvious on the surface.
Okay, so we've got the possibility of the father's side of the story,
Yeah.
potential issues with the evidence, and then the complexities of these children's disclosures. Anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. One crucial factor that we haven't even touched on is the potential role of prior court orders or custody agreements.
Oh, right. Like maybe there was already something in place that favored the father.
Exactly. It's entirely possible that there were previous rulings or agreements that influenced the judge's decision in this case.
Okay.
For instance, if there was a history of the mother making unfounded accusations or interfering with the father's custody, the court might have been less likely to grant her request this time around.
It's like every case carries its own baggage, its own history that can shape the outcome.
Precisely. And without access to that full history, it's very difficult to say with certainty what tipped the scales in the father's favor.
It really is like we only have half the puzzle pieces.
It is. It's a great way to put it. We can analyze the information we have, we can consider the legal strategies, but without that full picture, it's almost impossible to definitively say what led to this decision.
And that's what makes these cases so challenging. We're dealing with real lives, with real families, and the stakes are incredibly high.
They are. These aren't just, abstract legal battles. This is about the safety and well-being of children, and the court has a tremendous responsibility to get it right.
It really makes you realize that every detail, every piece of evidence, every word in these documents carries so much weight.
It really does. And it really highlights the importance of thoroughness and impartiality in these investigations. The court has to consider all sides, weigh the evidence carefully, and make a decision based on what they believe is truly in the best interest of the child, even if it means, going against what might seem like the obvious choice on the surface.
Absolutely. It's a heavy burden for sure.
Yeah.
And for those of us on the outside looking in, it's a good reminder that there's always more to this story than meets the eye.
Always more to the story. We can't jump to conclusions based on limited information. We have to be willing to embrace the complexity, acknowledge the limits of our knowledge, and approach these situations with empathy and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Well said. This deep dive into this family court case has been eye-opening, to say the least.
It is. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of these legal battles and the importance of seeking justice and protection for those who need it most.
For our listeners, I hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on just how complex family court is and the really difficult decisions that have to be made.
Remember, every case is unique, every family's different, there are always multiple sides to every story. Keep asking those tough questions and never underestimate the power of digging deeper.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.